The recycled air of flight, 815 tasted of stale coffee and anxiety. At 35,000 feet, the world shrinks to a pressurized metal tube, a fragile bubble of civilization suspended in an endless, indifferent blue. For Kate Anderson, it was just another Tuesday. Her movements were a study in practiced efficiency. A warm smile here, a gentle reassurance there, the subtle ballet of a seasoned flight attendant navigating the narrow aisle. She moved with a quiet grace that made her seem almost part of the aircraft itself, unremarkable and essential, like the soft hum of the engines. Outside, the sun was a brilliant, blinding white against the curvature of the earth. Inside, however, a storm was brewing, one that had nothing to do with the weather. It started as a low rumble from seat 22B, a man whose frame seemed too large for the economy class confines, his knuckles white as he gripped a half-empty plastic cup of whiskey. His name was Marco, a man whose patience had been shredded somewhere between a delayed takeoff and a turbulent climb. The tension coiled around him, a palpable aura of aggression that began to poison the sterile calm of the cabin. Kate noticed it, of course. She noticed everything. It was her job. The slight tremor in the hand of the elderly woman in 23A, the way the college kid in 21C kept nervously checking his phone. And Marco. She especially noticed Marco. His eyes, bloodshot and restless, scanned the cabin not with the weary boredom of a frequent flyer, but with the predatory glare of a cornered animal. She had seen that look before, in places far removed from the friendly skies. Places where the air tasted of sand and fear, not peanuts. She made a mental note, her training kicking in, cataloging his behavior, assessing the threat level. It was low for now, just another disgruntled passenger. But experience had taught her that the line between disgruntled and dangerous was terrifyingly thin, especially when suspended 7 miles above the ground. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing their initial descent into Las Vegas. For most, it was a promise of excitement. For Kate, it was a countdown. Kate Anderson, at 30, had perfected the art of being invisible. Her sandy blonde hair was pulled back into a neat, regulation bun, her makeup minimal, her uniform crisp. Everything about her was designed to be pleasant, professional, and forgettable. She was the calm voice in a crisis, the steady hand pouring your ginger ale. To the hundreds of passengers she served each week, she was simply the flight attendant. A function, not a person. This anonymity was a sanctuary, a carefully constructed peace treaty with a past she had fought tooth and nail to leave behind. A past etched not just in her memory, but into the very skin of her back, hidden beneath layers of corporate-approved fabric. Marco, on the other hand, thrived on being noticed. He was a man built of crude confidence and cheap cologne. A tattoo of a snarling pit bull snaked up his thick neck, a declaration of his identity. He was a mid-level enforcer for a local syndicate, a man whose authority was measured in intimidation and casual violence. On the ground, people made way for him. In the air, he felt trapped, his power neutered by FAA regulations and the polite, unyielding authority of the cabin crew. The conflict began over a second drink. Another whiskey, he grunted, holding out his empty cup as Kate passed with a service card. "I'm sorry, sir," Kate said, her voice even and polite. "We've just begun our initial descent. I need to secure the cabin for landing." Marco's eyes narrowed. "I didn't ask about the cabin. I asked for a drink." His voice was louder now, drawing glances from nearby passengers. A young couple in the row ahead shifted uncomfortably. "It's airline policy, sir. I can't serve any more alcohol at this time," Kate explained, keeping her smile fixed, a placid mask over a growing sense of unease. "Policy?" He laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You think I care about your stupid policy? I paid for this ticket. You work for me. Now give me my drink." He wasn't just a passenger anymore. He was asserting dominance. This confined space had become his territory, and Kate, in her simple uniform, was the symbol of the authority he refused to accept. She saw the shift, the moment his frustration curdled into aggression. It was a familiar dance. The puffed-up chest, the challenging stare. She held his gaze for a moment longer than necessary, her own eyes calm but unyielding. "Please lower your voice, sir. You're disturbing the other passengers." This was her final, polite warning. The line had been drawn. Marco saw her refusal not as a matter of policy, but as a personal insult. He unbuckled his seatbelt with a loud, defiant click and stood up, his large frame filling the aisle, casting a shadow over Kate and her cart. The cabin, already quiet in anticipation of landing, fell silent. Every eye was now fixed on the unfolding drama in row 22. "Did you not hear me?" he snarled, leaning in close, his breath a foul mix of whiskey and stale air. "Or are you just stupid?" The insult hung in the air, sharp and ugly. Kate didn't flinch. She stood her ground, one hand resting lightly on the cart, her body angled slightly, a subtle shift no one but a trained observer would notice. It wasn't a defensive posture, it was a ready stance. "Sir, I need you to return to your seat and fasten your seatbelt. We are preparing for landing." Her voice was still calm, but a new edge had crept in, a sliver of steel beneath the velvet. This only enraged him further. He felt his authority being publicly challenged by a woman he viewed as nothing more than a glorified waitress. He needed to make an example of her. "I'll sit down when I get my drink," he shouted, his voice echoing in the confined space. He lunged forward, not to strike her, but to shove the cart aside, to physically demonstrate his power. It was a clumsy telegraph move. Kate reacted with fluid precision. A simple step back, a slight pivot, and the heavy cart rolled harmlessly past her, its momentum carrying it into the empty galley space with a soft thud. The move was so smooth, so economical, it looked almost accidental. But it wasn't. An older man in a navy blue blazer, sitting in 21D, an air marshal who had been quietly observing, felt a jolt of professional recognition. That wasn't the move of a flight attendant. That was the move of someone trained in spatial awareness and threat avoidance. He subtly shifted in his seat, his hand drifting casually toward his jacket. Marco, thrown off balance by his own momentum, stumbled. Humiliation flashed across his face, quickly replaced by pure rage. "You think you're clever?" he growled. He turned back to her, his face contorted. This time, he wasn't going for the cart. He was going for her. He grabbed her, his thick fingers digging into the fabric of her uniform at the shoulder. "I'm done asking nicely," he hissed, yanking her toward him. The passengers gasped. A woman in the back screamed softly. The air marshal was already half out of his seat, his mind racing, calculating the risk of intervention in the crowded aisle. But Kate was already in motion. What happened next was a blur of controlled, devastating efficiency. As Marco pulled her forward, she didn't resist. She went with the motion, using his own force against him. Her body folded inward, her center of gravity dropping. In one seamless movement, she pivoted on the ball of her foot, her free hand coming up to lock onto his wrist while her other hand, the one he was gripping, twisted in a way that defied his strength. It was a textbook joint lock. A sharp, agonizing pain shot at Marco's arm. He cried out, his grip faltering. But he was strong, fueled by adrenaline and rage. He fought back, using his other hand to grab the front of her shirt, bunching the fabric in his fist with the intent to throw her against the bulkhead. The sound of ripping fabric was shockingly loud in the silent cabin. The crisp, white cotton of her uniform shirt tore open from the collar downward, the buttons popping off and scattering like tiny hailstones on the carpet. Kate stumbled back a step, the ruined shirt hanging open, revealing the simple black tank top she wore underneath. And then everything stopped. The air marshal froze, his hand hovering over his weapon. The passengers fell into a stunned, absolute silence. Even Marco, his arms still throbbing, stood motionless, his mouth slightly agape, his brain struggling to process what his eyes were seeing. Exposed on the skin of Kate Anderson's back and shoulder, visible through the torn fabric, was a tattoo. It wasn't a delicate flower or a whimsical butterfly. It was the iconic eagle, globe, and anchor of the United States Marine Corps. The artwork was intricate, the lines sharp, telling a story of immense pride and belonging. but it was the text inked beneath it that sucked all the air out of the cabin. Force Recon, the designation for one of the most elite, most feared special operations units in the entire U.S. military. The men who go where others dare not. The tip of the spear. The air marshal sank back into his seat, his face a mixture of shock and profound respect. "Holy hell," he breathed, the words carrying clearly in the dead quiet. He recognized the insignia instantly, but he also saw something else that made his blood run cold. The faint, puckered tracery of old scars crisscrossing the tattooed skin. Bullet wounds. Shrapnel marks. The silent testament of a warrior who had walked through fire and survived. Marco stared, his drunken rage evaporating like mist, replaced by a chilling, primal fear. He wasn't looking at a flight attendant anymore. He was looking at a predator. The transformation in Kate's demeanor was subtle, but absolute. The pleasant, accommodating mask of the flight attendant dissolved, replaced by an unnerving stillness. Her shoulders squared, her chin lifted, and her eyes, once warm and friendly, now held a flat, analytical coldness that seemed to pierce right through Marco's soul. She didn't assume a fighting stance. She didn't need to. Her very presence had become a weapon. "Let go," she said. Her voice was quiet, almost conversational, yet it carried an authority that vibrated through the cabin. It was the voice of command, a voice accustomed to instant, unquestioning obedience in matters of life and death. Marco's hand, still clutching the torn fabric, fell away as if it had been burned. His mind was a maelstrom of confusion and terror. How? This woman, this server in the sky. Force Recon? It was impossible. I don't, he stammered, taking an involuntary step back, bumping into the armrest of his seat. "You have a choice," Kate continued, her voice cutting through his daze. "You can return to your seat, buckle up, and remain silent for the rest of this flight. Or we can explore option 2. I assure you, you will not enjoy option 2. From his seat, the air marshal, a man named Frank, slowly shook his head in disbelief. He had seen his share of tough customers, but this was different. He wasn't just witnessing a confrontation. He was witnessing a clash of worlds. He saw the terror in the thug's eyes and understood it completely. That quiet woman held the power to dismantle a man like Marco in a dozen different ways before he could even blink, and do it all within the confines of a narrow airplane aisle. The other passengers were processing the scene in their own ways. A young man in a military-style haircut, sitting a few rows back, whispered "Semper Fi," under his breath, his eyes wide with awe. The elderly woman who had been nervous before now looked at Kate with a look of fierce pride. The narrative had flipped. Kate was no longer a victim. She was their protector. The silent guardian they never knew they had. Marco, sweating profusely, finally found his voice, though it was now a pathetic squeak. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sitting down." He practically fell back into his seat, fumbling with the seatbelt like a terrified child, his eyes never leaving Kate. He didn't just see a woman who could hurt him. He saw a woman who had survived things he couldn't even imagine. Kate stood for a moment longer, ensuring his compliance. Then, with a composure that was almost surreal, she calmly pulled the torn edges of her shirt together. Another flight attendant, a younger woman named Maria, rushed to her side with a spare crew jacket, her hands trembling. "Are you okay?" Maria whispered. Kate took the jacket and slipped it on, covering the tattoo and the scars, once again becoming the professional, composed flight attendant. "I'm fine," she said, her voice softening, the warmth returning. "Let's prepare for landing." As she walked back to the galley, the passengers erupted, not in chaos, but in a spontaneous, rolling wave of applause. It started with a young man with a military haircut and spread through the entire cabin, a heartfelt tribute to the quiet hero in their midst. People were smiling, nodding at her with respect. The fear in the cabin had been replaced by a powerful sense of unity and gratitude. Kate simply gave a small, almost shy nod of acknowledgement before disappearing into the galley. When the plane touched down in Las Vegas, a team of police officers was waiting at the gate. Marco was escorted off the plane in handcuffs, looking pale and defeated. He didn't say a word. As the other passengers deplaned, many of them stopped to thank Kate personally. "Thank you for your service," the Air Marshal, Frank, said quietly as he passed her, his eyes conveying a deep, professional respect. Both of them. Kate just smiled. "Just doing my job, Frank." After the last passenger had left, Kate stood alone in the quiet cabin, the silence a welcome relief. She ran a hand over the jacket, over the place where her past was hidden. For 3 years, she had flown these routes, seeking peace in the anonymity of the sky, trying to outrun the ghosts of Fallujah and Kandahar. She had wanted to be invisible, but tonight, she was reminded that you can never truly hide who you are. And maybe, she thought, you weren't supposed to. Real strength isn't about the battles you fight. It's about the peace you protect. Her new mission was right here at 35,000 feet. And Marines never abandon their post. What do you think? Does a hero's past ever truly leave them? Comment respect if you believe true warriors serve in all walks of life. And let us know your thoughts below.